Welcome, fellow beekeepers. This is Jamie Walters, OSBA's Maumee Valley Director and News Editor. I'm pleased to announce OSBA's new live webinar training series. Live sessions are recorded on the second and fourth Sunday of each month, 7 p.m. through Zoom conference call. You're welcome to attend by making a reservation on OSBA's website at www.ohiostatebeekeepers.org. Go to the events page and scroll down to the event you would like to attend. Confirm your RSVP by filling out the registration form with your city, state, name, and email address. Approximately 2 hours before the beginning of Sunday's webinar, an active Zoom link will be sent to your email address. Each training session will be recorded and posted on the following Sunday on OSBA's new YouTube channel. You can find it at Ohio State Beekeepers Association. You're welcome to subscribe and be sure to click the bell to be alerted each time we upload a new video. Each month's speakers and presentation will be posted on the Facebook page, by direct email to registered and paid members, and our website at ohiostatebeekeepers.org. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at editor@ohiostatebeekeepers.org. And now on to our previous recorded webinar.
Honored to be here, and I got to tell you that it feels peculiar because I work for Ohio State. I don't know how much to review. There's so many of you that are new, but I worked for Ohio State for just short of 35 years as the extension specialist and various responsibilities. And what seems to me like 2 or 3 years ago, I retired, but I think it's very close to 9 years ago that I retired from Ohio State. And I had, it's a long story. I'm not sure that an hour and a half's enough, but I had a contract with Auburn University that ran concurrently while I was working at Ohio State. So after I retired from Ohio State, I continued that project in Alabama through the Alabama Cooperative Extension System. So there's some Alabama people who've invaded this group tonight. So you need to see who's sitting beside you virtually to check out and see what's going on with that. So I've been around a long time. I live in Worcester, and it's surprising. One day you wake up and you got old during the night, but I've been keeping bees for 45, 46 years or so, and it just doesn't seem that long until you start reviewing going backwards. I chose this topic even though I really didn't have a PowerPoint program for it, no way to really put you through it, but it's important for you to know that I work by myself, and I'm not as young as I once was. I did grow up in a very warm climate in Alabama, but I've lived here in Northeast Ohio since 1978. And so sometimes the heat and the weight make this not as much fun as it once was. So I try to figure out ways to either work around it or ignore it or whatever. I'd like to spend some time discussing on keeping bees this time of the year. And I just checked, just as Jamie was introducing me, I checked my AccuWeather. It's 89 outside. Earlier today here in Worcester, it was about 93, 94 or so. If you want to go work bees during that time frame, it's going to be an adventure. I don't think you're going to be bored. I've labeled this some uncomfortable thoughts, and I should have said some potentially uncomfortable thoughts. This is the very first time that I've used this presentation, so everybody out there can be an editor and be watching for misspellings and bad euphemisms and poor wording and see how it goes from there. I've labeled it hot weather beekeeping, and I wanted to start off with this photo, not because I'm a tough guy, I guess because I am an old guy, but all those years ago when Africanized bees was all the rage and we were all going to die from killer bees, all those movies were being made. I would think there's very few of you in the audience that lived through that, but it was not a particularly good time because people then were not eager to have beekeepers as neighbors because something like this is what they thought would happen. But I'm showing you this because this was as hot as I have ever been in my life working bees. We had to have full-length suits on. Each of us probably had a half a roll of duct tape somewhere on us. You can tell by the guy there on my left, I would assume it's your left, you can see that little piece of duct tape that covers the vent on his helmet. We had to tape off the vents on the helmet because the bees would get through, and once they got inside, of course, it was ugly. So this was hot. I would not be able to do this now. I would not be able to stand the heat and do the work that we were doing in Venezuela to try to figure out if we could stop these bees before they ever got to the US. It was very fearful then. Of course, they have long since been to the US and apparently are amalgamated, and this is not an issue. So the purpose of this slide now is just to show you that it was 95, 92, 95 degrees that day, and we are completely covered up. It was actually a bit better if you sweat yourself wet. It seemed to help some. Why are they hot? When I'm just a beekeeper and I'm chatting with you and I say, boy, that's a hot hive now, they can go several ways. It can literally be a hot hive because of the temperature or whatever, or it can be genetically hot, and those bees come out and attack me just when I walk in the yard. I picked up a swarm maybe a season ago, 2 seasons ago, and immediately being 6 weeks, something went wrong. I could just go back there, a cup of coffee, I'm going to pontificate, I'm going to have a look at the bees in my yard, I'm going to watch the sunset. No, I'm not, because just as I opened the gate to go behind the stockade fence into the bee yard, there'd be bees that would meet me, 2, 3, 5 bees that would come over. Without any authorization, I named these bees sentinel bees because they didn't just guard their hive, they unintentionally were on guard for my entire bee yard. And I had to figure out which one it was. The story drags on and on. I had to figure out which one it was, and I had to ostracize that bee colony by itself onto a different location. I wrote about it in Bee Culture magazine because it got me, made me know my neighbors better when you've got a beehive that's attacking and being so defensive. So that's the genetics that we're doing that. They're programmed that way, they're wired that way, and ironically, quick comment, those kind of bees that are genetically aggressive like that are usually much better honey producers too, because they're aggressive in every way, not just in colony defense. Alternatively, the environment, what you're doing can make the bees testy, can cause them to act what we are then calling hot. It can be both these things. If you've screwed things up, beekeeper ability. Jamie, does my cursor show up on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Under beekeeper ability there?
Yes, sir.
If you beekeepers have made the bees angry, whatever, by crowding them, handling them with bump, thumps, whatever, you can make them hot. Alternatively, going back over, good nectar flow on, bees can act like kittens. I mean, they can be easy to handle. You can go back, you can have a look, you can take a quick look inside the hive and everything's great. And you do that with the same colony, July the 26th, and they'll put you back under the Ford truck. Same beehive, different time, different reason. And the primary reason for that is that there's a lot more bees there. There's a weather change, it's gotten hot. They're watching for robbing. There are a lot of controversial discussions on whether or not sublethal exposure to pesticides could actually be having some effect on this. So there are varying reasons why the hive that you thought was your friend and that you had a close personal relationship with is suddenly very scornful of you. Same hive, different time, different reasons. So a hot hive now was not a hot hive 2 months ago, will certainly not be a hot hive in September, October here in Northeast Ohio. So there are different reasons that come and go for why a particular hive will act a particular way at a given moment. I do want you to know this, in hot weather, things hurt. I don't know who you are. unless you're just really neurologically wired differently. But stings are never pleasant, and I really feel them more profoundly when I'm hot, when I'm warm. You know, you can go back and your hands are cold, and you have a quick look to see what a wintering cluster is doing, and there's snow on the ground, and it's some 17 degrees, 20 degrees. And when I'm cold like that, I just don't feel the stings nearly as badly. But now when I go back and you have a look, you get wired up. I mean, they can really motivate you to be young again. You're able to leap tall buildings, do whatever it takes. So those of you who are reasonably new to beekeeping, I suspect you're going to be covered up. Not every beekeeper, but most beekeepers who are new would start out with a full suit, top to bottom, gloves and the whole thing. And then as time passes and you realize the clumsiness of it, you gain some confidence, and you get to know bees better, then you'll begin to slowly take off some of those layers of clothes. And so at the end, you really want a veil on all the time, protect your eyes and ears and whatever. But usually you start out pretty heavily dressed because these stings are frightening, they are painful. For some of us, they are dangerous. And then as time passes and you gain more confidence, you change what you use as protective gear. I do want you to know, and it's a common hypothetical conversation. You're sitting beside, well, you used to sit beside people, and one day we will again. But let's just say that happy days are here again, and we're sitting by someone we don't know, and they say, oh, you're a beekeeper. And you respond that you are, and they say, well, when I get stung, it really hurts and I swell up. That must not happen to you. And I say, no, when I get stung, it really hurts. And sometimes I still swell some too. And it turns into an awkward conversation because you're actually telling this person that, yep, I do something that causes me physical pain at times. But I do argue that it's not the main thing anymore. It's the heat, it's the weight. There's other issues with bees other than the stings because I can protect myself from stings. But that's not always an easy sell. But I do want to tell you this. In hot weather, me personally, without any science to back it up, I respond a lot more, it hurts a lot more, and I don't want to be stung any more than I have to. So, like everybody else, I wear these designer clothes. My screen picture covers the upper right-hand picture. I would hope that everyone knows you can drag that out of the way. I'm not selling these suits. There are so many suits out there that I could probably give an entire presentation on these things. But the ones that I happen to use, that I have had either the money to buy or in some way acquired, basically are always a half suit. The one on the left, where I'm standing by the orange hive, this, if I move the cursor here, is a sheriff's suit. I probably shouldn't call brand names, but I like it fine. I've used them for years, and I had always liked the helmet, the lack of a helmet that I could wear a ball cap under. And normally I would just tuck that suit inside my jeans. So it's quick, it's easy, it's lightweight, works well. Maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I began to hear about these veils like this one here. Let's try to see if I can make the pen work. This one here, I can open that veil here. So there's my smiling face in here looking out at you. So if you're working bees and it's hot, it's a mesh type suit. You can open that veil up and take a drink of water, cool yourself down. I like you can answer the phone. There's all kind of reasons that I like that. No offense to the original suit that I still wear a lot over here on the other side. I can't do that. You'll do this once and you'll never do it again. You'll open that veil and you'll stand around for a while and you'll take a drink of water and you'll cool off, and then you'll go back to working bees without thinking to pull that flap back up. The bees will remind you of it. It's not a problem. They're going to remind you, and I don't think you'll ever forget it again. But that type of suit really works well when you're working bees on a hot day. I will tell you truly that many times, late winter or early winter, late fall, I don't mind a heavier suit. I wear that just for cold prevention. So as it is, hot weather bees, hot weather beekeeping really calls for hot weather suits. The blue suit to the right, I don't remember the trade name of it. They're readily available, but it also has the fold down front flap. I feel like I'm selling you something. No, I'm not. I'm just making the comment that beekeeping gear for many of us isn't the same throughout the year. And having said that, and not really having a picture support base here to make the point, beekeeping is actually a simple procedure. It doesn't require a lot of sophisticated technology, a lot of sophisticated equipment. We add all that because we want it. But really all you need is, you know, some boxes, some frames, maybe a pair of gloves, a smoker, hive tool, and a veil. And for the most part, you're good to go. So all the other swarm boxes and the devices that we need and all the extra bee veils, that's just strictly because I want it, not because I have to have it. So a lot of these suits I have bought just to experiment with, to try out, to see how it works, always looking for the best suit. You know, you never know when you are a historian and when you've seen the ways of the past and when you're a boring old guy with a coffee cup. But I am just still enamored with the quality of today's protective gear. In the old days, it was a pair of canvas gloves. My earliest veil was made out of just common screen wire. And then when you would perspire and it would drop on that screen wire, that new veil would rust through in hardly one summer season. So what do? You use some kind of tape. And then anytime you wore that veil, you had to look around the tape inside there because you had this on. And those wires and that veil would prick your face, would cut you. So when I put this stuff on, you have to have been there. You have to know how low quality the old stuff was to really appreciate what we're using here now. I would suggest, if you're going to really be involved in beekeeping in the summer, that you get a lighter weight veil, and that's something that can help keep you cool. If now any of you are commercial or keeping many more than 35, 50, 100 colonies, all this may be up for grabs because you're going to have to go a different way for that kind of thing. Turn the pencil off. I am not prepared to tell you that this is an end-all list. I'd like to suggest you take water you can drink for obvious reasons. I'd like to suggest that you take wash water because you're going to get honey, you're going to get perspiration all over something. It's going to be on your phone, it's going to be on your camera, it's going to be on your hive tool. So take all these products along to help keep this stuff cleaned up. I like these alcohol hand cleaners and alcohol wipes. I liked them before we had these virus issues that we have now because they did a pretty good job, not a great job, but they did okay, of taking populous off of me, off my hands, so I could keep functioning and not have to spread that to my wear, to the tractor steering wheel. Like I said, back to my phone or if I had a camera out there. So keeping cleaned up helps a lot. Wet wipes, paper towels. You got paper towels and you got the water, you're good to go. Wet wipes are handy just because you can wipe your face down, cool yourself off, and stay on the job. Ironically, those things dry out quickly. If the temperature is as hot as it is, even now it's 89. So those tissues will dry quickly, and I put those over in the burn barrel, and then I use them to start the fire and my smoker the next time I'm out there. So ideally, have a cooler along too. It's common sense, people. I'm just telling you what you already know. If you're going out and you're going to be gone by yourself, working bees hot, take care of yourself, have your phone with you, and have something that you can keep yourself cool and take care of yourself. Especially, I can tell you this from experience, for those of us who have been a lot younger than we are right now. Now, before I leave this picture, I need to also tell you that pretty much this is the same thing I'd take to the bee yard anytime I went, just to have these products here to keep the beekeeping project working as well as I can. So go out there and be prepared to make the move. In general, John, I know you're listening in there. This is very close to you, but I won't go any farther than that. In general, if you're comfortable, so are the bees. And I mean this winter and summer, anytime. So if you're in the yard and it's nice and shaded and it's a hot day, but the day's okay because it's nice and shaded, it's a good job. The bees are better off for it too. If you're out of the wind in the winter, when the cold winter wind's blowing and you don't feel quite so backed up into the coldness, then that same sense will be essentially what the hive is doing there too. So in general, try to choose a yard. I realize the folly of this, but try to use a yard that has attributes of being shaded or being not quite so hot, maybe a windy hill or whatever. I had a yard years ago on an abandoned military airstrip. It was flat top. It was easy to get to. You could drive right to it. You could park beside it. There was just this runway, a single runway. It looked like it'd just be perfect until you tried to stand on that runway in the summer. So I didn't abandon it, but it was hot out there. So try to pick a yard. Now, having said that, I am the guy who said time and time again to put bees wherever you have to put them. And different subject, different time, different place. You may put them on the roof. Put them in the loft of your barn. You can put bees wherever you have the opportunity to put them. But one of the things I'd like for you to look for is that yard going to be as convenient as it can for me to work when the temperature is so hot? I want you to point this out to you. One of the things that'll be coming up here in a few minutes is that I'll be making reference to using different sized equipment. These are feeder shells that the beekeeper had on here for feeders and these splits that he had produced. So that's a deep, but basically this beekeeper was running smaller equipment. And the reason for it was because of the weight and the concerns that they had with it. So when he's got this set up, it's in the shade, nice and neat. I don't like it being on that angled hill. I'd spend some quality time rolling down that thing at one time or another. But this equipment is easier to use, lighter weight, and will, in many cases, fit your bill better if weight is an issue. There's different sizes. Throughout my presentation, when I show you my colonies, it will be in deeps. And I have an odd reason for that, because my dad in Alabama had a little bee supply business. And then when he began to fade and the business didn't go, he was left with a stack of several hundred deep hive bodies. So almost 10 years later, I'm still using those hive bodies. It's not because I really love them, it's just because I have so many of them. But that hive body, by the best numbers I could come up with, is going to be at least 80 pounds, and it will be maybe as much as 90 pounds when the bees fill it up. Now, I never have been a muscle man, but there was a time in my life when that was not the end of the world to have that much weight on my fingertips. Didn't like it, but it wasn't the end of the world. But at my age now, 72, I'm really not crazy about trying to pick up a 90-pound box that's about chest high. So you work ways out to work around it. I'll make some comments about that in a few minutes. But the 8-frame box, the one that's right here, I get a lot of positive comments about people using 8-frame because it's lighter. Well, it is lighter, but it's not like it's light. I mean, it's still going to come in at around 60 to 675 pounds for an 8-frame box. So one of the things about honey and beekeeping is that when you're successful, you gain weight. It gets to be work. So it's one of those pleasant things. What's it like? Is it like fishing and having great luck? And then finding out that you're the one who's got to go home and clean all those fish? Is it like having a really nice garden that comes in and then you're the one that's exhausted at night working with all that corn and putting up all those vegetables? So it's that kind of rewarding, pleasant work, but nonetheless tiring. So these boxes are heavy. There's not much way around it if you are in fact wanting the bees to produce some honey. I included this picture above of all of these nukes up here because one of the things that's really grown in popularity has been using nukes. I mean, this nuke here actually has supers and has a feeder that can go on it and had an entrance reducer. It essentially was or is a 6-frame colony that I have. And the one here that's made of foam, increasingly expanded high density polystyrene is being used to build beehives. And I'll make another comment on that later on, that these units are different ways to keep bees because the foam has an insulatory effect, so the bees are different inside. But there's a very happy curse that comes with this. We have people who are really, really good at producing high quality queens. So in essence, what we end up doing is putting a very high powered engine in our beehives, and that engine goes very fast. So if we take any one of these nuke boxes and put a fine $40 queen in that box, it'll be surprisingly quickly short how that will outgrow it. And you're going to have a mass of bees hanging out front. We have no way to keep bees from growing. That is their sole intent. Beehives come in one size, extra large. And if they're not extra large, it's the goal that they have to grow to that point. So for a while, it's really nice to have bees that are in these small boxes. They're agreeable. You can learn a lot from the biology of these bees by opening and have a look without having all these defensive bees come out and check out you and your protective equipment. So there's a lot to be said for using smaller equipment, but you've got to be an on-the-job beekeeper because even an average queen is going to outgrow those boxes in a pretty good nectar flow season. Consider the equipment size. If you're going to be the one working alone, trying to get that honey off the top to a wagon to haul it back to the extracting room or whatever, it'll be your job for moving all that stuff around. So be as prepared as you can with that. I had good luck this year, and I've always said this to others, and now I want to tell you why I'm gloating. I had a diversion last year that kept me from my bees. It related to my health, but everything worked out fine and I'm back 100%. But my bees really got neglected and they essentially died in the winter. And those that didn't die were run down and weak. They were on their own and they didn't do a good job on their own. It's not their fault. They had Varroa issues and other things going on. But here's the deal, that's an oddity, and it's not just an oddity of mine. But I actually had a lot of honey on colonies that were either dead or were never going to use it. So adding to my bees, I bought, I think, 10 packages this past year, and I had probably 8 deeps. And I gave them all that honey back. And those packages just exploded. So these bees that I'm showing you right now are in 3 deeps, and they were 3-pound packages. January, February, March, April. The third week in April or so. So this is an idea of what these new queens can do with plenty of food, with bees that are not carrying a heavy mite load, how these bees can take off. But I do want to tell you this too. When I go back to my bee yard, these are not the colonies I go to, because these colonies are going to be work. These colonies are going to be the ones that that are going to punish me the most for trying to dig into these things. So I've always encouraged others, and I do it too, to set up an observation hive so I can get my bee fix by having a quick look at an observation hive or checking out that little 5-frame Nuke split that I made. So while these colonies are very pleasant, on one hand, they can be unpleasant just because of the sheer size and the fact that they are a full-grown mature colony. My best estimates, there's at least 75,000 bees in each of the 4 colonies that are pictured here. So I'm gloating because Varroa can take these bees out before next spring. If I don't control Varroa in these colonies and make sure that they're healthy, these beautiful beehives will not stay beautiful at all. It's as good a time as any to say that a beautiful hive is just for the moment. Your best hive now could very well be one of your worst hives just a few months from now. Something goes wrong, it loses a queen or swarms excessively. So this picture that I'm showing you here right now is just for the moment. I can't guarantee you that that picture will be here even in October. And I certainly can't guarantee you that these colonies looking this beautiful will be here next spring. So it's a little bit like whack-a-mole, that game that my grandkids play. You're just always watching which one's best, which one worked well, which one's thriving right now. And I do the best I can to make all my bees good, but I'm going to lose. I had a commercial beekeeper one time tell me that the yards automatically divided themselves into thirds. A third of the bee yard is going to be needy. Something went seriously wrong. Laying workers. By the time it's gotten to laying workers, though, it's pretty much gone. But something went seriously wrong. That's a needy group. And then there's a middle group. They're kind of like colonies that have European foul brood. They're probably not going to die in the winter, but they didn't really accomplish anything. They just barely broke even, the middle group. And then there's the superb group that are just, they look like this picture I'm showing you. They're just all absolutely beautiful. And that's the third that you wish they were all like. The guy told me that if you took that third, and he was commercial, so when he moved them, it wasn't just 4 beehives, and you moved the third that looked the best to a new location and set up that yard, that in about a season, what would happen? Of those beautiful colonies again, they would divide themselves into a third. So the point I'm trying to leave you with is that we build these colonies up to look like what I'm showing you. And it really isn't how the bees would run their business if they were left to their business. This does not make great survival sense for them. They would have been much better off to have literally swarmed, these 4 colonies, to have literally swarmed, small swarms, 10 to 15, 20 times. And statistically, considering it, they would have a better chance of surviving in the gene pool with those 15 different locations than with these 4 locations. So these colonies are abnormally this big because of me and the typical traditional beekeeper things that I did to build them up. So on one hand, I want my bees to be a natural thing, and I want to go back and understand their biology and their behavior. But in all honesty, I'm looking at their biology and their behavior in unnatural situations, because these 10 straight combs in each of these boxes, sitting side by side this close, this is not a natural situation. This is something I came up with. It won't stay that way. They will change. These big colonies are going to be messy. And I'm not telling you people who are experienced anything you don't know. But that traditional hive tool up in the right-hand picture up here, this one right here, that's the one that I must have 20 of these things. They're under the seat of my truck. They're hanging on the nails on the side of my shop. They're in the back bee yard. They're everywhere because I want one when I need one, and I can probably find several back in the grass. But when I'm trying to open these big beehives with that 100 pounds of honey on it, this lightweight, let's pull out this frame and have a quick look out of this single colony brood nest, that really isn't going to get the job done. And I have accumulated just whatever it takes over time to get that colony open. Boiling smoke, heavy protective gear, and trying to break those colonies apart using whatever it took. I would suggest, as the Australian beekeepers pointed out to me years ago, strapping the hive and laying it over, as I've shown here in this colony that's laying on its face. And those big colonies are easier to work laying on the ground. Of course, you got to have someone lay it down, because if that thing comes in at 225 pounds or so when you lay it over, there's a good chance it's going to break open. That, however, was your goal anyway. But frequently with big colonies that you're going to have to work and manipulate, and you're working by yourself, if you can get it laid down like this, it's going to cause a lot of confusion with people going by and saying you essentially pushing your beehive over. But it's easier to drive that red hive tool with that short hammer into those deeps and separate those things, and then pick that up on a hand truck on the ground like that and roll it away, than it is for me to try to take that top deep off of that, handle it, set it down some way, get it on the ground, drop it to the hand truck, and then move it from there. My point I want to make here is that when you've got these big hot hives in the summer, the traditional spring, fall, beginning kind of things are not going to work. You have to really attack that beehive to open it up, because it will be soundly stuck together. The hive that I show in the picture wouldn't have done it, but some of the hives that we've all opened up are so stuck together that you could push them over and nothing would happen other than the outer cover coming off. That short handle hammer it worked out well because it's short. The hammer handle was broken, and I cut it off and cleaned it up and reseated the handle and the head. But I used that in those big, heavy colonies that are stuck together on the summertime beekeeping to gently, and sometimes not so gently, drive the frames out from the bottom. So I'd break those deeps apart and then use that hammer to drive the frames out from the bottom. Over here, if I catch this top bar over here on the left, with any hive tool I've got, there's a great chance I'll just pull the top bar right off those end bars as soundly as it's stuck down. But if I flip it over, now back over here to the right, and tap right up on the edge of that end bar, don't bang it up, and I've already broken it along here now, keep in mind, so it's separated. But I can drive out one of those frames, and once you get the first frame or two out, then you're home free. You remember that I told you to bring water, because when you start tearing these things apart, honey is everywhere, bees are everywhere, you're hot, the bees are hot, your hands are sticky, and this whole thing basically is not as enjoyable as you thought it would be in some cases, but it is a productive reward. So summer management of beehives, I guess the truth of the matter is, summer management by most of us, I'm guilty, is a promise that I'm going to really get back there and do something. But when you have to go back and these colonies are this good and things are working this well, I often at times ask myself, what really should I be doing to make this colony any better? But if I don't control mites, and if I don't stop swarming, more about that in a bit, then this colony is not going to stay this way. So I have things that I should be doing in the summer. I've been kind of dreading this. Jamie knows all about it because I haven't clicked this thing yet, but sometimes find out that these gadgets don't work exactly the way I want it to. So I went back and I just picked up the fact that I want you to watch water, providing bees water. And I'll make other comments about it, but let's just have a look at the feeder, the bird watering device that my neighbor gave me. It's funny in a way because she said, these bees are always over here. The birds can't get to it. You just take that bird feeder and that bird water and you can have it. Well, I knew when she gave it to me. And I put it in my yard and she replaced it with a new feeder in her yard. We're just going to have 2 watering sites. So this is the watering device. That's in my backyard. I've got about 10 colonies. Right now, they're all boomers. And this is not only the bees from my operation. These bees are they're neighbor bees too, other bees, wild bees. But the point I want to make is that this is just one watering site. They know where all the watering sites are in the area. It's going to take them about a minute to load up. And these bees go back. They're water buffaloes in a way. And they're the ones who are responsible for taking back the water that keeps the brood nest at about 96 degrees Fahrenheit. Wouldn't it be neat, people, if somebody could figure out some way to put something in that water that would control those mites back in my bee yard? But such a thing doesn't exist to my knowledge. Honestly, this is an emergency picture that I put in here just in case the video didn't run. But it gives me a chance to say that this bee that's collecting this water on this hot summer day, we don't really know why that she decided with that little supraesophageal ganglion that she's got for a brain, why she decided to become a water forager, but she did. She left and went to search for water. She found it in my bird watering device. And she went back to the nest. I don't know which one. I don't know where she lives. And the eagerness with which she's met at the front door determines how quickly she goes back. So please keep in mind that while the nest is overheated and all those nurse bees are excited and concerned because the nest is too hot, we need water, we need water. So when that bee comes back with water, she's immediately unloaded. The bee's coming back with nectar and pollen, maybe some gum to make propolis out of, are not nearly as eagerly met, and so they stand around. They don't get unloaded as quickly. So there's a process inside the hive for selecting from the incoming commodities the ones that are needed immediately. After the hive cools down and the demand for water subsides, then this bee may stand around for a while, hypothetically, gets her feelings hurt, nobody wants this water, no demand for it, so she'll stop foraging for it. I picked this up in Alabama. I mean, it's commonly done. It's done across Ohio, but stagger the equipment and show the entrance that I'm giving up top there. It's about 1/4 of an inch and it's above the 2nd deep. So what you see there's the 3rd deep and it's pushed back. And not for this discussion. I don't know who would discuss it, but I actually took this picture for a discussion on propolis because that gloss covering that you see is where the bees have propolized the front of that hive. They're filling in my name with propolis, and look how they've covered the joints on the end. They're really super serious about propolis, and that's not the topic here tonight. But propolis is a neglected topic that the bees are really serious about. You can tell that upper entrance where the bees are either, they're propolizing it, controlling it, defending it, and the bees are fanning and venting to pull that hot air out of the colony. They don't use those entrances, those openings, They don't use them as entrances to the colony. And this is the kind of thing that gets me in trouble with this technology, because you say it and then my comment will live forever. But I sometimes wonder if bees that are using that as an entrance are not robbers, that they're actually using that door to go in and out of the colony that the self-respecting bees wouldn't use. They would be going out and through the proper entrance. The old masters have said that those bees that are foraging need to pass through the brood nest to see what commodities are in big demand, and that to short circuit that and go through an alternative entrance away from the brood nest would not give them the most valuable information about what should be collected. So I stagger the equipment. In the hot summer months, the bees will fan there. They will line up above that, just under my name, right across where I've got stagger the equipment written there, and they will line up roughly in rows, and they go through this procedure that just drives me up the wall with curiosity. They'll do that washboard movement. I'm not trying to just go to YouTube and type in washboard. I've got a video posted if you want to go specifically to mine, but washboard movements are everywhere. And to this day, I'm not really sure what they're doing. Again, this is not the topic for tonight, and I tend to get off the topic and ramble around too much, so I will not go down that road. But there's a lot more in this picture than just me showing that colony pushed back, that deep pushed back about 3/8 of an inch, just about enough for those bees to squeeze through and to ventilate. And please keep in mind that there's a twin entrance on the back side, just like it. I did this all the time. I see it in Ohio, but I did it all the time when I was an Alabama beekeeper. July, you remove surplus honey in the hot climate, and this is a pivotal moment, because when you get to this stage, I don't know who you are, but I would argue loudly that from this point on, it's not beekeeping. By the time you get this equipment filled with this honey off, from that point on, you're a honey processor, not a beekeeper. The beekeeping part of it's over. This becomes a totally different world, because you got to be concerned about electric motors and plumbing and stainless steel extractors and glass jars and all kinds of things that are not directly related to the health and well-being of the colony. This is the processing of the product. Honey is heavy. I went to the farmer's market yesterday morning here in downtown Worcester. There must have been, 15, 20 vendors there or so. And there was honey, local honey for sale at 4. I know of 4 different vendors. So local honey is on the market right now. It seems to sell reasonably well. I know there's, in that case, a demand for it, even though we don't always produce enough honey for our own usage commercially. For local use, it works out well. This also makes the point that is challenging for a solitary beekeeper. This box is dead weight heavy. It's going to be really difficult to take those frames out and brush individual bees off. It's going to get honey everywhere. So again, in my defense and in my explanation, that was why I wanted you to take out a gallon or 2 of water to keep cleaned up as much as you can, because you hop back in the car or the truck and smear that honey all over everything, it's going to get messy quickly. So one of the things that we do here is that we remove surplus honey. It's going to be a hot, heavy job, and you're going to get to know your bees up close and personal, because they're going to take it personally. I don't know if I believe this series in here or not, but this gadget existed, late 70s, early 80s. The Bee Off blower system is a 5-horsepower motor mounted behind that fan. The fan blade is perfectly balanced. It was made by a New England aircraft company. And that motor was directly mounted to the motor, that propeller is directly mounted to the motor shaft. Start that thing up, run it up to full volume. It would put out an absolute hurricane of air. And then you, the beekeeper, would work your bees in that slipstream of air. And no bee would sting you because no bee could deal with that velocity of air movement. But there were issues with it. That on the back is a stand that would go beside the hive. And if you really use your imagination, underneath the prop between the wheels is a smaller bee blower. And so you would use that leaf blower to blow the bees off. So this device was used to rob honey or remove surplus honey from the bees. The problem was twofold. Number one, it pulled the exhaust through the propeller and blew it right on you. So the whole time you're working, I was breathing engine exhaust. And number two, since the bees could not fly back to the colony, they would fly around the neighborhood and they would be drawn into the screen protector on the back of that fan. And inside of, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes, I'd have 5 pounds of bees stuck on the back of that fan. They were essentially all right. You turned it off. But for the short time that that thing ran, it was cool. It worked. You were working in a strong breeze and the bees didn't bother you and you weren't breathing smoke. And it was one of the few times that I found the safe haven from having to use smoke on any day, hot day or otherwise. So I've never forgotten that. And I had a notion that I made a short videotape of, and I have a need to say, don't try this at home. I would say I'm a trained professional, but I'm not sure I should say that. So if I come to this next picture, what I'm going to show you, it's going to get noisy. I'm going to let it run, and then I'll talk to you afterwards. I think it's self-explanatory. So stand by. This gadget is from my leaf vacuum system for my yard. I feel a need to say that no bees were harmed in this video. It worked out reasonably well. The point that I was trying to make is that, number one, I work by myself. Number two, it's hot out there. I did this was just day before yesterday when I did it. It was 87, 86 degrees in the yard. The fan running is cool. The bees are somewhat okay with this blowing procedure. It keeps me in a protected zone. I'm not recommending this, but I am experimenting ways that I can work out there by myself, get work done, and not have to lighten equipment or do whatever it takes. So bear with me. It's an experimental thing. There are no recommendations involved in it at all. I found that those big colonies like that, when they gained a lot of weight on this soft Ohio soil, those colonies would begin to lean. So I've had good luck, not really cheap, but I've had good luck with those air conditioner pads that goes under air conditioner compressors. Buying one of those, I bought 3 of them. That's the one that shows, and it keeps the colony level when you get those set up, and it keeps the colony from leaning. And I've been afraid in the past that some would actually tip over. So that was my effort to use a blower as a cooling unit in the summer. If you just go get a fan, a big barn top fan, all those bees that are in the air will be pulled through the fan. So you need to put something on the back, and you need to expect that that fan will clog up. So make a cone or something so that the bees can get off of that back screen if you use something otherwise. Otherwise, the fan was just something that helps me work. Why don't you ask me right about now? Why don't you work bees early in the morning? Well, I'm going to talk about that. Why don't you work bees late in the afternoon? Talk about that too. But sometimes I don't always have control over my own schedule. And if you have to work in the heat, or if I'm going to be taking off honey or making splits, it's important. And before I go, I want to tell you that I chose this colony. I knew where the queen was. I knew that that was going to be mostly capped honey up top. I would not use a system like this just for opening a colony up out of risk of blowing my queen to who knows where. So this was staged strictly for honey removal. As you might expect, using these blowers, using a bee blower, using a leaf blower, whatever, will just fumigate the whole area. So one of the summer activities that you can expect as a result of using forced air for removing bees from supers will be bees going crazy robbing. It's because of us. We're the ones who brought these colonies too close together. This is not a natural situation. These colonies are too close together by their natural scheme of things, and these colonies are too big by the natural scheme of things. So the robbing that would occur in an oak tree hollow is just minuscule compared to the robbing that was going on here behind the bee lab. Sometimes people tell me, well, I put the stuff out, let the bees rob it out. Well, it's okay. But then again, it's not okay, because for the moment, you're not in control. And those bees will go crazy fighting and killing each other over what's going to be a very, very small amount of honey. So robbing is an issue in the summer, and it's one of the reasons that bees are so feisty. So when I go back to work bees, look at bees just to see what they're doing, are the raccoons back there last night, whatever, I will have more trouble on that short trip in the summer simply because of the statistics of the fact that so many unemployed bees are sitting at the hive with not much to do other than come out and greet me. And that is an issue because of the environment that we've set up for the convenience of us keeping bees. It's not a convenience that I want to get rid of, but it is a convenience that comes at a cost to some extent. Those beautiful queens that came in those packages, that built those packages up so nicely, will shoot to a population that could not be biologically maintained. It's not going to be in the bee's nature to go into the winter with a 6-pound cluster. I don't know why. I don't know my numbers. I'm not sure that I have science to support me. But the bees are going to cut that number back to around 15 to 20,000, a population that would form a typical winter cluster, and the dynamics of it would work okay, and on typical winter stores. So what happens to bee colonies like the ones I've been showing you here is that I want to get these late season suicide swarms. And the thing that's so frustrating about seeing these swarms hang in the trees around my apiary back here is that I know that they have my high-end, high-dollar marked queen in there. So I will be, I promise, no exaggeration, but as soon as this day is over, I got to work with garden products tomorrow, but on Tuesday, I am going to go back and make really heavy splits. More on the split thing in just a few minutes. But thanks to Rockhurst Farm for this picture that they've got showing here of a colony that this time of the year, and this picture is recent, this time of the year, that colony is going to be inclined to swarm. So late season swarm management is basically a loss. If you've got the honey, if you have the inclination, a beekeeper could probably get this colony through the winter. But if this swarm leaves on its own as late as last year, it was September and October, that swarm is not going to survive. I mean, it was basically just cleaning out the colony. It would look, but the problem is, then that queen's got a mate that was left inside the colony. So these late season swarms can result in the demise of the colony by having it go into winter without a proper queen. So late season swarm management, split them. And then if you don't want the splits, put them back together in a month or so or two from now. But the main thing is the queens. Don't get involved in this queen thing where the queen's hanging on a pine tree limb or the colony is trying to get a queen mated late in the season. I know how a beekeeper up the road here, about 20 miles from me, with the way he was doing summer splits, which was several years ago. I mean, it was routine for him. He was selling some of these splits, and he was using some to raise queens, and he was recombining others. So splitting is a common thing. I'm trying to accept the concept that I'm not really working with a specific number of bees. I used to find it intriguing that you'd ask a bigger beekeeper with bigger numbers of bees, how many hives do you have? I've got about 220. I got about 250. That about word was always intriguing because normally in my bee life, I know exactly how many I've got. I've got 25 hives, got 40 hives. I count every one of them. But actually, I've grown more to accept the fact that what I really have are bees in 40 boxes and about 25 queens. And of those 25 queens, and of that hundreds of pounds of bees in those boxes, I have these options that I can do with this. I'll divide them up into some number of increments, and I'll call that a hive. But there really is nothing horribly wrong with making a split for a reason, raising some queens, doing whatever it takes, and then recombining that split back later on. So the number is not particularly important so much as the quantity of bees that you have to work with and the number of queens that you have to work with. One of those colonies back in the backyard right back there now is a package, and the queen just was gone. 9 queens beautiful, 1 queen just gone. Well, you're going to pay 40 bucks more. I got to drive 25 miles to get a queen. I'll just combine them. So I've had a 6-pound swarm and a fine new queen, and that did work. Well, a 6-pound package and that new queen just exploded. It was in 5 deeps back there. And my plan was I'll split it back out and I'll get my colony back later in the season. Well, it's grown so big, I could actually split it 4 times now. But there's just no reason. I mean, if you don't stop this somewhere, we'll have 1 million colonies at some point. So the point I'm trying to make is you can split, put them back, keep them split. You can do whatever you want with this. And this late summer season split thing that goes on now will mean that you may have to feed more, care more, nurture more to keep them going the way you want. Otherwise, because right now there's no flow, nothing going on. And oddly, the summer split will sometimes too help with the Varroa mite control because it'll break up the brood cycle in the queenless part of the split that you take off. So split the big colonies rather than just have them fly away. I would say, you know, it's an environmental thing. If you lose a swarm, don't obsess over it. Well, that's poppycock. Every time I lose a swarm, I'm just annoyed that it's gone. So, yeah, I don't mind the bees going back to the environmental system. There's no, you know, the wild bee population's depressed, but without some kind of Varroa control, they only have a year or two out there before they're going to be gone. So I want to try to control that swarming as much as I can, but the bees really don't want swarming controlled. They really want to be able to procreate and reproduce. Make late season colony splits. You don't have to live with them through the winter, but try to keep your queens, try to control the bee population so you maintain your pool of bees. Keep bees at night. Get it out of your system. But there's really nothing wrong with working bees at night. And I'm talking about beekeeping in hot weather, sometimes cooler, but sometimes these hot summer nights with air real still, it can almost be as hot as at night as it is sometime during the day. But I've had great luck. If I drop all the way down over here to swarm capture, jumping ahead of myself, so I've had some really good luck picking up swarms at night. You get all the bees at one time. I didn't require making a second trip back. Now, they were close to the ground. I won't be climbing any trees or doing that kind of thing. The other thing is that working bees at night can motivate you because they don't fly, they crawl. And they are absolutely uncanny about the little nooks and crannies and the weaknesses they can find in your bee suit. So be prepared to have all that closed up, nice and tight. Going to have the largest bee population you'll ever work with. All the bees are at home. You're going to lay a hive tool down in the dark and not be able to find it. You're going to run over your smoker. So there's things that happen at night that make nighttime beekeeping unique, but it's not the end of the world. If you move bees, that's almost always done at night. But from a hot heat standpoint, sometimes working bees at night, doing light work could be an option that's not explored very often, but it comes with quirks. My dad and my brother had hundreds and hundreds of hives at one time. And then everything began to fall apart. Dad aged and whatever. And so ironically, it came down to one lone beehive that was left. And it lasted for years and years back in the brush by itself. So I've named that the farewell hive. And in a way, that's it for tonight. I'm winding down. I want to ask Jamie to come back. If we've had some discussion, if I've done something or said something that somebody takes issue with, we'll clear it up. But so far, thanks for letting me sit here in my cool shop, not being outside, and talk about hot weather beekeeping and some ways that I found to work around it, work with it. Thanks for listening.
All right, Jim, we have a question from John. Is it possible that a dirty jacket or veil or gloves can make the bees more aggressive due to the pheromone and stings?
That pheromone is going to dissipate fairly quickly. If you've just really been under attack and those gloves are soaked in sweat and stings, that can encourage more stings. But if those gloves laid around for a while, they're going to air out, harden up, and you can go again. So only under extreme conditions would that make a huge difference. But good question. I've already talked too long, but when we did that Venezuela thing and I showed all that picture, the next day when you put your hands inside those gloves that had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stings on them, there would be stingers, lancets that had gone all the way through the glove. And so your hands were pricked and hot and fiery inside the gloves from the stingers working their way through that thing. And those gloves would antagonize those bees the next day. But those are the extreme conditions that I thought of when the questioner quizzed me on that. Thank you.
Janice has a question. How successful are you in overwintering your hives? Any suggestions for success?
Oh, that's like letting you look in my sock drawer. How successful am I at overwintering colonies? I lose the 30 to 40% that most of the beekeepers lose to. I'm sorry. Uh, that's a great question, and it's got an embarrassing answer. Sometimes it's better to put my energy on the ones that I think have a chance of surviving than it is to really spend time and energy and product on a colony that's going into winter weak and wasn't a great colony in the summer anyway. I don't want it to die, but I guess I'll put my eggs in the best basket, if I could break a euphemism. So I can tell you straight up, with a high degree of personal confidence, but no science, is that you want your bees healthy, Varroa suppressed first and foremost. Because just sending a big swarm, a big cluster with 100 pounds of honey on it into winter, but without a good solid Varroa control program, you're going to have bad luck. You're going to break the 40% loss, because they are going to have the bee die off, the winter bee die off too early in the spring, and they're not going to make it through. So beautiful colonies can die that went into winter with a heavy disease virus load from Varroa, and can leave a remarkably good honey crop on dead bees. So if I had to say anything, is control Varroa, keep the bees healthy as possible, send a well-balanced, well-shaped colony into winter. In Ohio, 65 to 70 pounds surplus honey, not the extra, that's the honey, not the weight of the equipment, into winter, and you ought to have good luck.
All right, Michelle, how do you attract the bees to the bird bath? I have issues with my neighbor's pool. I put in a bath so they don't seem to like it. She also installs a Boardman feeder with water just in it. So how do you get them to the bird bath, Jim?
I'd rather go back and talk about the winter loss question, because the bird bath thing is worse. I can't stop them from going to the bird bath. I mean, they went to the bird bath over in the neighbor's yard, and all I did was move it. Well, of course, it's different bees. There's not a single bee in the world that's coming here 3 years later. But you said the magic word, pool. And that's just miserable, because that chlorinated pool, if it's chlorinated, sometimes the salt pools now are not quite as, when I say smelly, I don't mean, like a bad smell. I mean like a chlorine smell, but that's a marker. But ironically, the old beekeepers, and sometimes there'd be a short chapter in a long book, would suggest just putting in a tablespoon of salt in a gallon of water, and put just the faintest salt taste, and the bees would take the water better and more aggressive. I don't know why, trace elements, minerals, whatever. I don't know if it's even true, but it was a current recommendation years ago, late 1800s through 1920s, 1930s. So if your neighbor has a salt water pool, it may be even worse. And there are no good answers for that. You can't just put water out in your yard and put a Boardman feeder on and think that no bees are going to go to your neighbor's pool. They are. I mean, not if you moved all your bees out, your neighbor would still have some bees coming to that pool. So I don't, that's not going to carry the day with your neighbor. But pools are issues with bees, because they are perpetually dependable water sources, and both types of pools have distinguishing markers that help the bees find them readily. Ideally, in a perfect world, it's an exquisite pool that has a cover. You can cover the pool, everything's great. I don't have a good, who was it, Michelle?
Yes.
Michelle, I don't have a good answer for you on that. You're doing the right thing, putting out abundant water sources in your yard, because every bee you keep in your yard is just one less bee you're going to have go to in your neighbor's pool. But there will be insects, bees and other insects around the neighbor's pool because it's a water source.
All right. One from Janice. How far from the hive do you put your water source? Is it better to place it closer to the hive?
The water source I put there is artificial, and I put it in the middle of the backyard for photographic reasons, not because it's scenic and pretty, but because I had a wide area around it to put the cameras up and just do whatever. And it's close to the shop because I'd have to take water out and pour it in. The bees are going to find water all around their environment. They will find a leaking water hose. They'll find any spot of water they possibly can. They have foragers out searching for it. And I don't want to get all sappy about how clever bees are, but they are really good at what they do. I've seen bees back there who found water on a tarp that was actually undercover a bit, and they were going undercover a bit under the tarp to find what must have been just a half a pound of water there. And there were 7 or 8 bees working it. Not one, 7 or 8. So I have no idea which bee found it and how the other bees got there. So my recommendation on the water thing would be put the water where it's convenient for you. And then you got to leave it there. And the bees have to find it. You can't, no newsletters, no email messages. The only way that that's going to work is that water is there dependably. And then once a bee or two finds it and goes back and puts the happy word out and sends out some kind of directional signals, then they'll begin to take over. So I like the bird thing because while I was waiting for the bees to find it, the birds used it. But there's so many bees there now, it kind of takes a bit of a suicidal bird to come into that. So be persistent. Don't let it run dry. If you let it run dry, then keep in mind 3 to 5 weeks in the summer, all those bees that knew where that water source was have gone to the great hive in the sky. So you've got to re-educate the bees then to where that water source was. So it's important that wherever you put it, is that it always has water in it.
All right, I got one from another Michelle, and this has always been a question back and forth. She says, they really don't like clean water. So in your bird bath, you're showing clean water. She has a bird bath that has a small solar pump to keep it from being a mosquito haven. It's filled with algae, and she has to clear the pump out all the time, but the birds and the bees love it. And it's behind 5 foot behind her hives. So is there a big difference between the nasty water that you see the bees in or that nice clean water that you have?
All right, back to my sock drawer. That was strictly camera angle. So you wouldn't see the algae in my bird bath. I angled the camera so that it bounced off the water with a reflection because there's algae. What I would do, I take about 1.5 gallons, 2 gallons of water a day, and I go out and just dump it. And whatever bit of the algae I can flush out, I let it flush out. And you're exactly right. Bees annoyingly go to water sources that are despicable. As a younger man and with a live audience, I would have told you just how despicable. But since this is going to be recorded, and I don't know exactly who all I'm talking to, this is as far as we're going to go, but it involved the cattle feedlot runoff. I mean, they really go to some obnoxious places, and it's because there's a scent cue that they can use to find the place. Now, other cues we think would be visual cues, a fish pond, and that's great. But it really helps if that water is not pristine clear. You're exactly right. And bees are going to collect it from wherever they can. And they have biological systems in themselves and in the honey to some extent for controlling any kind of bacterial or virus infection in general. I don't always. And sometimes they find water we wish they wouldn't find with chemical runoffs or whatever. But my water was not clean. You made me admit it. I tried to set the camera up so people couldn't see it, and I've had to confess it. There it is.
All right. John's got a question. What was the small yellow handheld device you used on top of the hive while taking off the supers?
Big box store. I think I got it at Lowe's. You can get them anywhere else. It's just a blower. It's got the, I feel like a salesman. It's got the snap-off battery. So it worked out well. It's also good for after your wife gives you a haircut for blowing the residual hair off your head. Any kind of lightweight blower like that, though. You know, don't blow them right down inside the colony, and don't smash them into something. If you're going to be using this kind of thing, let the bees blow out into the open. And they are surprisingly tolerant of that. It's almost like they were hit by a gust of wind, and it was a big gust of wind, but they don't just go ballistic. Now, I did push it, and I went over and just blew bees on the entrance, and they took a dim view of that. But if you can give them some biological perspective that this was a huge gust of wind, this wasn't the crazy guy with the veil and the smoker. They tolerated it reasonably well. All that I showed you is not a recommendation. That was me tinkering and just showing you my tinkering, trying to understand how to use a blower on a hot day, both for my coolness, not because I'm cool, but because of my comfort, and to also keep the bees from coming back and attacking me, so there was no smoke. I love not having to use smoke.
All right. Is it too late in the season to make a swarm cell too late? I have one hive that's really big, and I'm concerned about swarming, but I haven't seen any swarm cells.
Okay, ask me that question a different way.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to read. Is waiting to make a split when you see a swarm cell too late? So if they see a swarm cell here in the next couple of weeks, is it too late to make that split?
I don't want you to see a swarm cell, because once you see a swarm cell, they've already gotten a swarm mentality. They're in a swarm place. And sometimes if you make a big split with the colony that had a swarm mentality, you'll get two swarms, one from each half. Well, how many, if you make big splits. So not seeing swarm cells is a good thing. So either just make a walk-away split, let them raise their own, but you've got to watch that. You've got to help them. You got to feed them. You got to nurture them. You may have to socialistically take brood from others to pump them up, to balance them out, because they're getting such a late season start. Alternatively, is pay the money by a queen, or less of an alternative, but not impossible, is to find a queen producer who would sell you queen cells. If you happen to know someone in your group who raises queen cells. But I don't know that waiting till you see swarm cells is a good way to go. It's not wrong, do it all the time, but even if you use that swarm cell and you get a queen from that cell, then you've unintentionally propagated swarming inside that future colony. Not the end of the world, it happens all the time, but probably wish you hadn't have included that when they swarm next year.
A question from Amanda. How can you judge how many splits you can take from a large colony?
Amanda, I'm going to assume you've been keeping bees long enough, 10, 15 years or so, to ask such a question. The earlier it is, the more splits you can take. I wouldn't take anything, three frame splits, early spring. Okay. 3 frame splits, July 26th, where we are here in any part of Ohio. Can I just guess 6 frames? And I'm going to have to take care of those. I'm going to have to feed, nurture, monitor, watch, be sure they're requeened, whatever. And most of this is personality or philosophy. Do you want to split a colony to death? Or do you want to take just a split or 2 and then have the parent colony recover? In a harsh, unforgiving world, you could hypothetically make 1 frame splits, but you really got your work cut out for you on getting anything built up. You've probably got to haul bees to Florida almost to get them through any kind of winter. So practically speaking, this time of the year, I would want bigger splits, 5 to 6 frames, so probably 2 to 3 out of a big colony, those big colonies back there, because I'd want at least a full deep left. I want my seed corn. I want a unit that I can depend on enough to survive the winter. that I got something to work with next year. Now I can take my own advice. Those splits don't work, I'll recombine them. The main thing I don't want to happen, if I can possibly help it, is to have those nice late season swarms fly away that are out of sync. They're wrong.
All right, I'm going to combine a couple questions here from valued user and down from Robert. What is your mite treatment? And at the beginning, I told you I'm an old school beekeeper. I started in the 70s. And man, I miss them days. So what are you using for your mite treatments?
Yeah, I'd like to do that thing my granddad did for controlling boll weevils, where you have 2 blocks of wood and you put the boll weevil right here and then you slam the blocks of wood together and you kill the boll weevil. That was really a control technique that would work on Varroa. We've gone past our hour and a half, and I don't want to drag it out, but I got to get philosophical for a second. That Varroa mite,
go ahead.
It's an admirable foe. The world scientific community has given it its best punches, and Varroa's bloody, but it just laid for a while and bled and rose to fight again. So what I use right now is a combination of oxalic fumigant. That's going to offend some people who use dribble or don't use it at all. And then I cross that up with Apivar. And I rotate those back and forth. In the earlier times, I've used tobacco stems. In the earliest days, I go back to the 70s too. I even remember those plywood days when you made your own strips out of plywood, and it was legal. And coated them in dip. I can't think of the name of it, and it's just as well if I said it. I'm afraid some of you go try to do it. Don't do that. It's illegal now. So right now, that's what I'm using is oxalic and Apivar. Is that a recommendation? No. No, it's not. Because there's all kind of things back in the shed back there that I would roll back out and try again. So if you've got something you're really comfortable with, then you should not be comfortable. You need to have a second plan B all the time to keep resistance from developing from whatever your plan A is.
All right, Michelle's got one. It says, I keep a salt block under my bird feeder. I've seen bees and other pollinators take it from the salt block. And I've heard that quite a bit on and off through different generations.
Anybody got cattle? What goes in salt blocks that kills flies? If that salt block does not have that in it, then those insects will go and work those salt blocks, especially bees, especially the brine. They've seen those bees around where the salt block sits in a trough and water forms and there's brine, salt water, and the bees were picking that stuff up, and they're looking for some kind of trace element, some kind of mineral that they're not getting in the wild. So, yep, they will go work it, and they're doing it voluntarily. The only problem is if that salt block has some kind of insecticide in it that was for fly control, and I can't think of what it is. I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting the question, but it's a good one.
No, Jim, are you thinking of the ones that are brown? Because there's TSE here in Defiance has 3 different colors, and I know they have different properties for different stuff.
I am out of my league now.
Okay. The last question is from Eric. To save a queen, would an excluder at the bottom be beneficial to keep her, to get her through the next few weeks?
Yeah. But it's, let me think how this is going to work. Because you're going to jam that excluder up with drones. So if you put that excluder on the bottom to keep her in there, then you're also going to keep all the drones in there. And I've seen that happen before. You think you'll open it up and let the drones out, well, then she might, I don't know what the reason is. If she's going to be swarming, what your concerns are. You think you might have a swarm going. But you could do that, but it's going to cause chaos inside the colony. The colony is going to stress itself because the drones are going to die, and each bee is going to run around carrying part of a drone trying to find a way out, and there's not a way out. So let me think how that could possibly be made to work. There's old drone traps and whatever. Overall, that's not going to be the answer to your questions. If you're trying to control swarming, that's not going to hold up.
All right. And Amanda just got back with you. She says, thank you for the advice. She did a 3-frame split in May, but the colony has gotten huge again. So,
well, that's a very pleasant problem.
Yes, it is.
I forget how I worded that in one of those pictures, uncomfortable reality or something. I forget what it was. We've done this. We want big colonies, and we have these big hyped up turbocharged queens. They do a great job. We do have good queens, and you do pay for them. But the dirty, well-known problem is that good queens produce a lot of bees, and a lot of bees swarm. And I had a swarm hang back here. I did the triangulation 60 feet in the air. And I knew my queen was up there. And then, it's in a residential neighborhood. There's nobody behind me right now, but there's neighbors on both sides. So all the gun and bow and arrow and business. So all you can do is just walk by. And it took 7 days for that swarm to leave. I put out bait boxes. I tried to sing to them at night. I did whatever it took to coax that swarm down, but they finally went their own way. So we do build up nice big colonies, and they do produce nice big swarms that are painful to watch go away.
And Mr. John Turon put in is tetrachlorophoss. Tetrachlorophoss is the chemical that we're thinking of. He has horses, but he doesn't use it. So
okay.
That's the chemical in it.
Thank you very much.
Everybody else, great time. Thank you much, Mr. 2. Great information. Thanks again, Jamie, for spreading the presentation. Great presentation. You did an awesome job. And the poll come back. Thank you very much for everybody's feedback. And it was out of this world. Knocked one out. So thank you very much for everybody's time. And thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.